Our next speaker is Roger Box. He is the digital division lead from Clemenger BBDO. Prior to Clemenger, he was working in the US and New York at Digitaz, and one of the projects that he led at Digitaz, which is one of my favourites, is the American Express Small Business Day, and there's some really amazing case studies that cleaned up at all the award shows, and it's fantastic to have someone like Roger come and present his view of the future of digital advertising. So, welcome.
Good morning. So I thought it'd be interesting today with the topic of the future of digital to actually look at a practical framework for things that are near term, because I know there's a lot of talk about things that are coming down the line that are further out, but most of us, whether we're studying or working for organisations or agencies and the like, have these types of things coming across our desks. So I don't know how many people in the room attended South by Southwest this year. Is anyone? A few? Okay, that's good. So I think a great place to start is looking globally for the types of trends that are coming through, and then thinking about what the application for us, whether it be in the kind of local market or our businesses are. So what I'm going to do is share with you my view on 3 simple frameworks from some of the trends that I saw at South by Southwest. The first thing I'll show you is a 60-odd second video. It's gritty because I shot it on my iPhone, just to give you some of the context for what South by Southwest is.
Which you can control almost anything. You can type the text and be there.
So the reason I think South by Southwest is such an interesting place to look is, as you can see from that, this sort of this group of 35,000 people which literally kind of take over Austin, and this is a good example of one of the things I saw there. There's a lot of conversations around products and technology and social media and all those types of things. So Oreo were there, and basically the device you can see here literally took some of the top trends from Twitter and put them on a screen, and you could select one of the things that were trending, and it would produce an Oreo cookie on that basis. So sunny day in Austin would have a yellow filling, and it would be lemon flavoured because it was yellow, and it actually would print that on the Oreo itself. And that, I think, is a great example of where technology is really coming together with social media to actually produce products. So it's kind of fascinating to see where companies are taking things. The other thing about South by is, it started about 20 years ago with a heritage in robotics and much more in the kind of hardcore technology realm of things. But I think more and more what we're seeing is it is this behavioural science experiment where brands are going there and trialling new things, and the cost of not doing something that's innovative or pushing is at best no one will turn up, and at worst you'll absolutely get slammed on social media. So it's a really good test bed for organisations to go and kind of push the boundaries, and that's why I think it's particularly interesting to look at what's the practical application of things and how they're working. So just a couple of examples. There's literally hundreds of brands that are there kind of pioneering new things, from Chevy that were there, driving people around in cars, getting kind of real-time feedback. Grumpy Cat, I think we saw before, was one of the most popular representations for a brand there, but lots of different organisations testing different things. So I'm just going to cover off in pretty short order what was the most talked about topic, what was the biggest innovation, and what was the biggest evolution. And these things you'll all be familiar with, which I think is a good kind of starting point. But as I said, I just want to share my view on how I think we should think about those things when we start to address them. So the first big one was information versus privacy. Now, this has been going on for a number of years. It really heated up this year. So the first person talking about this, and I think we've got representation from Google later, but Eric Schmidt, who is chairman of Google, had these kind of three key things to say. In the next 3 to 5 years, 1 to 2 billion more people will join the internet. I mean, that is fascinating when you think about, the penetration and the growth, and particularly in emerging markets and those types of things. And his view is that people are good, the public should be informed and connected, and that actually blocking off information is obviously a serious concern for Google. But he went in to give examples about the power of that from an education perspective. I mean, there are lectures from Harvard that exist today that, small towns in Africa will have the same access to in a few years than anyone else. From a farming perspective, the ability for, people to look at best practices and those types of things, medicine. So you can see where the power of information and sharing kind of comes forward and the great benefits of that. The counter to that view, Edward Snowden, I don't know how familiar folks in the room are, but basically he's currently in exile in Russia for what is known as one of the biggest breaches in US history of government information. So basically his issue was that the government was doing mass surveilling without kind of prior knowledge or connections of whether people were doing nefarious things or not. So he leaked that information. And his view is that the NSA is setting fire to the future of the internet. We rely on the ability to trust our communications. Without that, we don't have anything. And he kind of states that the next WhatsApp and Twitter need to have this end-to-end encryption. So he's very much about the protection side of things and being cautious about how much is being shared because of the views of individuals. So you can see there's kind of a good and evil version of it. How does that apply for brands? I think Google is a great example. When you look at one organisation, the amount of information they have on you, as you can see up on the left-hand side, Google alone knows what videos you're viewing, what mail you're sending, what documents, if you're on an Android device, if you use Google Wallet. I mean, that is a vast amount of information for one organisation to have about you. And really, I think it comes back to that simple thing, like when you're thinking about the practical application of data and all those types of things, are you building trust and are you being clear and transparent about what's being developed? Because we are walking data generators, whether we like it or not. Most people have a smartphone. You've seen all the stats. But the reality is, and the great thing is for us as humans, we have the ability to block that. So the kind of contra to that is that we know that there's inherent advantage in sharing information. It can make our lives easier, better, more seamless, and people are willing to share as long as there's that value transaction. So I guess my key point of that is, if you're really transparent about why you're collecting things and you're empowering people to do more things, then you are going to build trust. And if you don't, and you surprise people, things like this can happen. Sorry if there's anyone here from Target, but this is a great example where Target intended to do the right thing. They were looking at profiling information to make more relevant offers to people. And unfortunately what happened was a teenage father went into a Target store irate about the fact that they were sending his daughter products for pregnancy, cribs and those types of things, and I think she was 16 years old. And then about a week or so later, when the store manager called back to apologise, he said, actually, she is pregnant. So they were able to tell by the types of things she was buying, more vitamins, etc., that in fact she was pregnant. So it's interesting, the intent was there, but the scenario didn't kind of bode well. That's probably not a headline they sought to achieve. On the other side of things, this is a great example we saw at South by Southwest, where they can actually profile your ancestry now. For about $1,000, they can look at your DNA and do some really kind of fun, quirky things, from how much Neanderthal you have through to actually looking at your propensity for certain diseases and the like. Now that's fantastic if you're thinking about your own health and how that works. But for example, if that information was released to health insurance companies, you might find yourself getting higher premium rates and those types of things. And again, people probably don't want that broadcast on social networks because they're quite personal things. So you can see that kind of challenge between data and open source information is a really, really interesting space. I think for brands in particular, it's going to be up to us to decide, the future of how willing and open people are to sharing information. The next thing, wearables, lots of talk about them. We heard, I think, a few presentations ago about this. So I think just kind of taking a look at what I saw and some of the really neat things, I don't know whether you saw in that video, but basically there was a 3D printer actually producing a vinyl record on one side, and then on the other, there was a stick actually playing the record as it was being printed, which is kind of like the Cummins-Ross video. Crazy quirky, but kind of interesting to see where it goes. So, I think it's kind of good to break it down. The reason I think wearable is going to be very prevalent and hit us very soon is the fact that if you look on the left-hand side here, near-field communications, accelerometer, thermometer, gyroscope, sensors, GPS, LED, all those types of things, basically those are the technologies that enable wearables to do the things that they do. And the great news is they're getting vastly more effective at actually, accurately reading information and significantly lowering cost, helped obviously by most smartphones have 3/4 of these things already built into them. So you're seeing some really interesting ways of doing it, and no longer is it the realm of, $10,000 prototypes. There's lots of examples of companies now that are already in the business of doing this and have monetized it. So it's definitely a bona fide thing. And on the right-hand side, you can see, they're integrated into cars, bank cards, gloves, water bottles, headbands, golf clubs, pet tags. So there's kind of a raft of things. And again, some of the stats you saw earlier about how prolific this is going to be. So just a couple of examples of things that I saw and were talked about. Bank cards have a huge amount of information about you. We're kind of, there's touchless payments and all those types of things. But if you think about the ability, it knows your address, knows how much money you have. You can program into cards very simply your preferences for colour, size, etc. So you can imagine a world where you walk into a store and I need X number of t-shirts, one swipe and they're actually delivered in the size and your colour preference and those types of things. Connected transport's really easy. It's a bit of a nightmare kind of globally trying to get around from places. So actually cars talking to each other and some of the experiments that are happening around the globe are really interesting to look at, thoroughfares and maximising transit routes, as well as the safety of one vehicle talking to the one ahead of it, knowing what it's doing, has the ability to provide a safer kind of roads for everyone. Exercise is huge. There's gajillions of apps out there. Some recent acquisitions for Move because of the algorithm, what they're able to tell through the Move app. You no longer have to select, I am doing this activity. It knows by the movement whether you're jogging or riding a bike, etc. Pills, this was something that came up earlier. Obviously the contact lens version is really interesting. Pills now that actually prevent you having to have surgery. So for intestinal problems and the like, swallow a pill, it takes photos all the way down and away you go. And then even things like insurance premium, fitness apps connecting with insurance premiums and the like is really interesting. So my view on this is the wearables that I think are doing really well are where they actually become invisible. Google Glass is often one that's talked about, and there's examples of where people have actually been in brawls as a result of wearing something that's quite overtly, capturing information from the world. But I just thought the Adidas bra is a really good example. It has a built-in heart rate monitor, connects to an app, and away you go. So it's something that you're doing anyway without kind of having to bolt this technology onto your body. So really the thing is here, you have to get that form, function and the storytelling, the reason for being right, and that's when the wearables are going to really come to bear. So 2 examples. This was one that sort of, was shown at South by Southwest. It's Kickstarter idea as well, which is the Melon headband. So it's one of those ones, basically this reads your mental activity and can give you a read on whether you're in a calm and relaxed state or, what the best time of day, for example, is for you to sit down and tackle more difficult tasks. So I think the application is really good, but I can't probably see myself wearing one of those, walking around the street or up on this stage anytime soon. On the other side of things, this actually won one of the very few awards for wearable technology at South by Southwest, which is the Scully helmet. So it's a motorbike helmet. Motorcycles are significantly more likely to have an accident. So this actually has a built-in heads-up display, think kind of Tony Stark, and it can do things from showing your speed so you don't have to constantly glance down. It has a mounted rear vision camera in it so that you can see behind you without having to do head checks. And it's just a great example. I mean, it's a beautiful looking prototype that's been created for it. It's something that people wear anyway, but actually integrating all this great technology is a really effective use of where wearables come to bear. So I thought this is kind of well deserved of the Wearable Award. And the last thing I'm going to cover is not net new, but the evolution. And a few people have covered this already today, but the idea of social media and where that's headed. So there's sort of two trends under this. The first was this idea of discrete social platforms. You can see there is a significant growth in platforms like WhatsApp or Wicker that really limit the number of people you're sharing things with. There's limited time and also limited exposure apps, so building in end-to-end encryption and the types of things that Snowden talked about. So it's kind of interesting. It's almost that notion of we want to share things, but we're getting more and more concerned about how to do that. So these social platforms that facilitate that are growing. And interesting example of how that's been used fairly recently. WhatsApp limited time period for how long things appear. So a lot of organisations in the US are starting to capitalise that for offers. So basically, an offer will appear for 10 seconds. So when you get to cash register, you have to pull it up to see what that is, and you show it to the person on the other side of the register. So it's quite intriguing to see how these platforms are being leveraged for business. On the other side, Etsy, Airbnb, and Uber. These are just a few of those things, and that whole notion of the share economy, I think, is going to be a huge thing. And from a business perspective, there's a lot of conversations around: is this detracting from corporations because they're actually utilising these underutilised assets? I think for organisations to actually just view how that model works for them is a really interesting space to play. So my view on this, we should invite participation. It can be a really scary thing. It means we work in a more rapid kind of real-time world, but the organisations that are doing this and embracing it, 3M's a great example. I think it's 30 or 40% of their revenue is derived from new things that are created in the last 2 or 3 years. So they have that constant innovation model, and they do things, for example, at South by Southwest, using their post-it note to talk about new innovations for their company. And off the back of that, they were going to put a few of those into R&D. It's a great way to crowdsource ideas. And not the kind of creative output that comes off the back of it, but what are these things that people need? So real-time research is really powerful. Google, I think, are fantastic at it as well, from crowdsourcing art and all the things they do. So my view on that is invite people to participate, and organisations that do that are basically going to drive engagement and co-creation and a sense of community that actually helps their business drive forward versus actually hamper them. So a couple of examples here. I thought this was pretty funny. Kind of social media working against itself. So 35,000 people descend on Austin, and I was talking with someone at the start today. Everyone's on Twitter and checking in and doing all those things we need to do to look really digital. And all the Austin people are like, God, this is a nightmare, but all these people are checking in. So what they do is populate where geographically most people are basically headed or trending, so that they can actually steer clear of them. So it's a really interesting kind of smart use that was developed by one of the local agencies. And another one getting really smart, Uber. This is actually my creative director was actually in LA on the way across, and he was taking a few Uber cabs. He was out at a club at 11 o'clock, and an offer popped up that said, we've got a hotel booked for you in Vegas, and the car can be with you in 3 minutes. Do you want to go? It's really interesting using that time and contextual examples of how to, tap into a drunk person who might want to go to Vegas. So I kind of thought it was pretty cool. He didn't go, but he said he was very tempted. Or maybe he did go and he didn't tell me, but anyway. Using social data and what people are doing and kind of connecting that with the share economy, again, I think is something for us to all think about and be aware of, certainly the next 12 months, because either they're going to be a competitor chasing your tail, or you need to kind of step in and lean forward. One final example of that, I think, is a lot of the big e-commerce platforms have struggled for a while with, traditional retailers have struggled with the fact that people go into their store and then they walk away and they buy it on Amazon or whatever the case may be. So we're actually seeing pop-up stores now arrive where they don't actually carry inventory. You can go on, try the wares, and then you click purchase and it's delivered back to your home. It's a really good example, because if you try and draft against what people are going to naturally do, I think you're probably going to struggle to do it. So actually thinking about really innovative ways that reduce the demands of actually carrying inventory and the like is a very smart way of adapting that. Thank you very much.